We did it, folks. Aaron and I went out there and watched the first 2 episodes of Lord of the Rings of Power on Amazon Prime. And it wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't offensive or anything. It was just kind of dull and boring, Aaron.
Yeah, I didn't hate it. I didn't like it. I was just sort of ambivalent about it. Once I kind of got past the fact that, and I'm not a Tolkien scholar by any means. I haven't read the appendices since I was like in high school. So I don't remember all the details, but, I definitely knew there was a lot of things that were wrong, like Galadriel being a warrior is wrong, and there being hobbits in the First Age is wrong, even though they try to get around that by making them proto-hobbits and calling them Harfoots. There's just a lot of things here that are not right. I definitely think that, well, we'll get into it, but yeah, I didn't love it.
Let's talk about the good first. You cannot deny the production value is absolutely off the charts. I don't know that it looks like they spent $1 billion on it, but it certainly looks like they spent a lot of coin. It looks very fantastic. There's really only a couple of moments that I can personally point to and go, that didn't look quite right or didn't look as good as the rest. Specifically when they went to Valinor and she was returning and like the skies opened up and like they were going into heaven. I don't think that was all that effective. And then the sea creature, the worm, like it didn't look like good CGI, but I think every other like scene that they had, I thought looked like there was a ton of production value. They spent a lot of money and it looked like it.
Yeah, kudos to the visual effects team. They did a really good job. There's some really effective shots, there's a lot of helicopter shots, so get used to those. But they really did a good job with all of the visual effects. When they're going into the mines, the Dwarven mines, it looks fantastic. Unfortunately, the scene doesn't live up to a lot of the scenes don't live up to the spectacular nature of the visuals that you're given. I think that the ice troll fight at the very beginning was really bad, just really bad wire work, and they go out of their way to try to establish that Galadriel's this badass warrior and et cetera, and it just doesn't fit. The actress is not very good in the role. She can't close her mouth. Her teeth are always showing. There's just a lot of little nitpicks that I have like that.
I would say that Galadriel, who I think is played by Morty Clark, I would say is probably the worst thing about the show, which is a problem because that is the star. Like you said, they come out right out, they give you a narrative about everything that's happened. Then you meet the hobbits, just like in the movies. And then we get back to showing her like what an amazing warrior she is. And she's out there for vengeance and blood because Sauron killed her brother and he branded her. And she's looking for this symbol all over the place. And they've gone to the far reaches of the world. And her fellow elf warriors telling her, not even light will go to this place. It's so dangerous. And she's like climbing ice walls solo, leaving all of her troops behind. It felt like the only reason those guys were there was to observe and report on how absolutely amazing she was. She literally takes down this enormous monster despite having a band of like 12 other elf warriors with her single-handedly.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in this. There's the girl at the well who's I don't know the names of any of the characters. I think Nori is the Harfoot character. She's the only one that I know that isn't already from the movies. None of these made up characters for the show have really like stuck with me as far as who they are. But the woman at the well, like they go out of their way to show her kill an orc, which is cool. But then she's got to go back and she's got to show all the men of the village.
Slams it on there, like yeah, get out of here, sir.
Yeah, there's no real heroic men in this so far, except maybe the elf lover. Yeah, the elf lover of the he's kind of dropping down into tunnels and going after, investigating orc activity and things like that. And I think that the show is mildly engaging when you're doing those sorts of things, but mostly it's just people standing around talking and talking and talking. And it's visually beautiful because they're on these, CG sets. But the art looks, the light looks artificial, and it's supposed to be the sun shining on them. It never really looks right. They're in a warehouse somewhere and someone just prettied this up with CG. So, yeah, there's a lot of things that I think don't work. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it.
We need to get back to Galadriel. We want to kick. That's the main character, and I got a couple other complaints. This character, despite living thousands upon thousands of years, is absolutely brain dead. They're going back to Valinor. She's going to return to the original elf home. And she decides, like, right at the border, and you see the map, like, she's crossing the Atlantic Ocean to get there. Mm-hmm. She decides she's not going to go and, like, jumps out in the water and is going to swim across an ocean to get back to Middle-earth. It's like, how stupid are you? You're going to freaking die. You can't live in the ocean like that. It's like, how did you live so long?
she's a very dumb character. They're going out of their way to make her tough. And wouldn't it be cool if she just like swam across the ocean? Be like, no, it's dumb. It's dumb as hell. Like the fact that she just chances upon some wreckage, with some other people on it. And then there's a big sea creature that's like eating them. It's like, she should have been eaten like halfway across that. Like how good a swimmer are you? Also, the way that that's set up, that happens. I believe she dives off the boat before we cut back to a scene with Elrond and
off the boat, right?
No, I think she jumps. She grabs the sword, and I think she jumps.
Oh, yeah, I thought you were talking about when she's on it and they push her off.
No, she she dives into the ocean. She's going to swim back, and get her vengeance. And that scene happens, I believe, before a scene where Elrond is talking to Brimbor about how they need to, get backing for this project they're going to do. And then they travel to the Dwarven kingdom, and the way that it's kind of set up, the map makes it look like this is a very long trek, and like some time passes, and then we cut back to Galadriel swimming in the ocean, and I'm like, has she been swimming in this water for weeks? Am I supposed to believe that? I know she's long lived, but that doesn't have anything to do with like her ability to swim and need to sleep. And
she ends up on this like shipwreck, and there's a few other survivors, and there's a lot of racism in this show, which I don't think really is in line with Tolkien. Like the races were weary of each other, but I don't think they were outright racist towards each other. But that's definitely in this show, which I thought was a little bit off-putting. But she gets all the wreckage. They're in a storm. All the other survivors have died except for this one guy. I think his name is Halperin, maybe? I probably got that wrong.
Who cares?
Yeah, who cares? Matter. The human guy that she's going to fall in love with. In the middle of this storm, we've got some loose wreckage with a mast somewhat attached to it. She's like, let's tie each other to the mast in the storm, which is going to act as an anchor and drop us down to the sea bottom. I was like, this is nobody with half a brain cell would ever think that was smart.
That's the writer. The writers, hey, they're from Bad Robot. What do you expect? Anybody who has any connection to Bad Robot that goes out there and starts writing scripts does a poor job. She sinks with the mess. Actually, you know what? I take it back. There is a heroic moment for a male character. That guy dives in the water to go save her. It's completely implausible. It's like,
why didn't he just bring her up with the rope? I was like, why are you?
Because she was attached to the mast, man. He couldn't pull up the mast too. Also, the mast is wood. Wood floats.
Well, there was a little metal piece to it.
Was there? Okay, I missed that. Okay, so yeah, then all right, then that's fair. But it just kind of reminded me of like in G.I. Joe: The Rise of Cobra, where they blow up the glacier over Cobra's base and the ice starts falling. I was just like, what?
Yeah, so I don't think they did Galadriel very well at all. It doesn't feel
she's
like
very unlikable. Just you don't really care.
If someone says she's a Mary Sue, I can't argue with that.
No, so far I couldn't argue with her being a Mary Sue either. She very much is so far.
So we also heard from Grace Randolph, like a scooper when it comes to movies, that she thought the elves in this show were gay. And I was watching it, and I was like, I don't really get it until we saw Elrond and Brimbor together.
You know what? I didn't really get that. The scenes were weird. I'll definitely give you that. I didn't get it. I didn't read it as sexual tension or them being hot for each other.
There.
But I took it as kind of like there's a respect for Brimbor being this great smith, and Elrond is like, oh God, he's this, this dude's the man. Look, he's got the hammer and everything. Maybe you're right. Maybe there is some subtext, but I didn't really take it that way. I didn't think that it really seemed like there was any sexual tension until we got to Durin and Elrond, and then it seemed like, man, Durin's really mad that he
made me the most mad about the show. I love the dwarves in Lord of the Rings. I think they have a lot of flavor to them. They're very distinct. And what they did to Durin the Fourth here was just, they murdered my boy right in front of me, Aaron. I couldn't believe it. He wouldn't speak to him and challenged him to like this battle of wits. I think it was supposed to be like comedic. There was a couple of jokes in here, none of them land, where they're cracking rocks and stuff. And it turns out he won't speak to him because he didn't go to his wedding. That doesn't feel in character at all. Like, where do these dwarves come from?
It didn't land. There's a lot of things about the show that didn't land. The dwarf scenes were the worst, in my opinion. It's what I was the most excited for. There's this great lead in where they're like walking through the mines and you're getting this great visual shot of how cool them look. I love dwarfs. I'm even painting one, for my Mythic Legions right now. But, you've got all these these great visual effects, and it just leads up to a scene that like I feel like the actress playing Doran's wife was trying to be comedic and it doesn't come off, and he's trying to be comedic and it doesn't come off, and it just everything with them just felt really awkward, and I did not enjoy those scenes at all. I could not wait for them to get over. I wanted to get back to the black elf in love with the girl going through the tunnels and trying to find out what was going on with these tunnels that were being dug underneath the villages. Like that was the most compelling part of the story for me.
Yeah, you're talking about the Arondir and Browan story, which I thought was kind of strange. I never got the feeling in Middle-earth, like the elves took over Middle-earth and were like patrolling all the towns to keep them in line after Sauron. And like, is this colonialism? Aaron, is that what's going on here? Is that why it didn't feel right?
You have to remember that like none of this is Tolkien. Like, the actors have basically come out and admitted it. Like Lenny Henry came out and was like, F you, we're telling the story now. Like that was basically like his statement, which I respected to a certain degree. Just, hey, don't lie to me and tell me that, we've been so respectful of Tolkien and, Tolkien's vision and all the things that they come out and say to try to get you on board. Don't come out and lie to me with that. Just come out and tell me, no, we're going to do our own thing. We're going to insert modern politics. We're going to have our own commentary about, things that have been in the news. That's what we're going to do. Just tell me right from the outset. I respect that more than I do being lied to. I don't respect what you've done with it. I thought that, it seemed very strange. The elves talking about how they had dirty blood, from their connection to, serving Sauron. There's just a lot of things in here that were really weird. I will say this, though. For all the complaints that the casting of that character got by being a black elf, he does have a very unique look with his, he's got light skin, he's got green eyes. I think that he would work in another franchise, another property, as an elf. Like you could do a whole race of elves where you cast light-skinned black men with like green or blue eyes, and it would give them kind of an exotic other culture kind of look that I think would really work. It doesn't really work within Tolkien's world because that's not the way that he built it. But I think that the actor is good enough, and I think that in another feature, this whole production, if it were something other than Lord of the Rings. Yeah, if they had just done an original story, I think that it would be a lot more accepted. It still wouldn't be exciting. It'd still be very dull the first 2 episodes, but you at least would kind of be, more invested because you wouldn't be so distracted by the things that and the way that they're kind of like violating, the lore of the world.
What's weird is with the Arondir and Browan characters specifically, it's clear that people in the town know that Browan, I don't know if they're sleeping together, but there's some type of little romance. I think she's a single mom. He's a soldier. And they do not like the fact that she's like kind of with or has some type of attraction to Arondir. Is it because he's an elf or is it because he's black? I don't know what they're trying to get at here.
Yeah, race swapping hit that particular elf. I mean, I guess it's not really race swapping because he's an original character altogether, but, just it muddies the waters. I was kind of confused about that too. I was like, well, is it just because he's an elf and they don't like the elves? Or is this a black thing? Like, what are we actually trying to get at here? And it started out somewhat subtly, and then it just got so heavy handed where she comes back with the orc, or, she's telling them that the orcs are digging under the villages and they need to take precautions, and they're kind of like poo-pooing it. And then, giving her attitude because, she's consorting with this elf, and all of a sudden everybody's like, like they all know and they all disapprove. And it just becomes so heavy handed that like, I just rolled my eyes. I was like, you guys were better when you were doing this subtly, where everybody was just kind of like, is she,
What's your mom doing?
Yeah.
So
when it was like rumor, but then it became like it's a fact and everybody knows it. And it's like, they disapprove. And it's like, okay, well, if the whole village disapproves, you'd think they'd do more than like give her the stare. You'd think they'd like be outright horrible to her, or kind of like banish her, or something. If that's the point that you're trying to make. But I don't know. It's just all very. It's not very well executed, and I think you can say that about the writing for the first 2 episodes.
But we can give Arondir credit. He was the one investigating stuff and kind of find out what the hell is going on, because there's just like dirty grass growing, and next thing you know, there's an enormous meteorite that lands. There's just bad signs going on. A lot of this has to do with the Harfoots. I guess we'll talk about these last. They don't want to call them hobbits, but they're clearly all hobbits. The one hobbit, Nori, she's a girl, but she looks exactly like Elijah Wood. I don't think that was like on accident, Aaron. I think that she's supposed to remind you of him.
Yeah, you're supposed to identify with her because of your love of the films, even though these aren't connected to the films. They definitely went out of their way to cast somebody who looks like her. They very much act like Merry and Pippin in a lot of ways, her and her friend. There's just a lot of callbacks to the Peter Jackson movies and to the books in that regard. I wish instead of doing homages and pastiches of the book that they had just tried to honor Tolkien's lore, since they're calling this Lord of the Rings, or do something original. Those are my two, either do something original or make Lord of the Rings, but don't give me this half measure in between. We want to stuff the Lord of the Rings skin with, a bunch of stuff that isn't Tolkien.
When that meteor happens, Nori's the one that finds it, because she's the one hobbit that's, wants to get out of town, I guess, and do a little adventuring. And there's a dude there, and they pick him up, and he's in a wheelbarrow. And I think there's a joke or two that they just don't land. But when he finally speaks, all the trees come down, and he's affecting the weather and everything. And this is a hobbit. They're supposed to be secluded people. They don't want to interact with other races and stuff. They just kind of want to keep to themselves. But she's like, let's be friends. I'm like, this doesn't make sense within Lord of the Rings. He probably looks like the devil himself to this character where she's come from.
Because you need to know how brave and adventurous she is. That's why, logic goes out the window. It's this is what I want the character to do. You see it with Galadriel too. Well, we want her to jump off the boat and swim back, and that'll be really badass, even though it makes no sense. We want this hobbit to befriend this guy that would be very scary and probably, seem like a demon to her, even though it makes no sense. It's like Ryan George on pitch meeting, man. But why? And then the writer goes, because I wrote it in the script. Because the story needs to happen. So much of writing right now is, I need this to happen, instead of, why would this happen? How would this happen?
So me personally, like I said, Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, episodes 1 and 2 at least, really dull, terribly paced. And I don't know. If it wasn't Lord of the Rings, I think it would still just kind of be a dull, uninteresting fantasy story that had a little potential.
Well, Jeff Bezos, when he got the rights, he said he wanted his Game of Thrones, and you can definitely see the Game of Thrones influence in here, in the way the way it's constructed, the way they're trying to show these different houses, the use of the maps. Unfortunately, their model seems to be the last 2 seasons of Game of Thrones, because characters are just bouncing all over so quickly, and you can swim across an ocean no problem, and it's pretty nonsensical. Jeff Bezos also said, I saw a thing, I didn't read it, but he was just saying that they didn't follow his notes. And how incompetent a leader are you if you're the head of this company, you've paid billions of dollars, you give notes to your employees and they just ignore you and just do whatever the hell they want anyway. I don't know what his notes were, but he said they didn't follow them. How ridiculous is that?
Yeah, it's Bad Robot. What do you expect?
Yeah, well, we need to stop. Hollywood needs to learn this lesson. I've now seen my 3 favorite fantasy franchises get adapted badly. Lord of the Rings was always the one, because of the Peter Jackson films. I was like, it's not an exact translation of the books, but it's a really good representation of the books, and I really love it. But Shannara, The Wheel of Time, both of those have been terrible, and I guess now they've come for Lord of the Rings.
I love Shannara. The MTV just did not get the spirit of what that was supposed to be.
Those books are fantastic. I fell in love with them. I actually read the second book first, and I went back and got the first book, and then I was like, "This is just Lord of the Rings."
It was very much Lord of the Rings, and it veers off a little bit.
Yeah, Terry Brooks obviously was a big Lord of the Rings fan, and he was kind of he ended up copying a lot of that. But then the future books, he really went off in his own direction and made it his own. So I definitely recommend those books for anybody who's looking for some good fantasy novels.
But not the show on MTV.
No, do not watch the MTV show. It is bad.
As Aaron mentioned, this isn't the first time we've had a franchise we love destroyed. We actually went back and rewatched Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, which is an absolute abomination. I never wanted to see this, but I did it for you guys. Aaron and I talked about every single thing wrong with this movie, and there's a lot of it. About 40 minutes of grievances on this review. If you're on a mobile device, there's a link in the video description.